GT 2024. Here we are.
Thank you. Finally.
We made it.
Well, here we are on the BEDROCK streaming stand for the OTTRED Spotlight Live. Our topic today is going to be in-car entertainment, the future of in-car entertainment. And Felix, we know each other already because it's something that we've touched on. Thijs, it's something that I'm looking forward to exploring in much more depth with you. And from the warm-up conversation that we were lucky enough to grab with each other last week, I know this is going to be a fantastic podcast. I'm going to start off by letting you guys introduce yourself. It's important that people listening or watching can appreciate the organisations that you work for and maybe some of the pedigree that you've got that we're going to draw on for the topic. So, Thijs van Herkhuizen, would you like to start?
All right. Thank you a lot. And thanks for having us on the show here. It would be great. First day of IBC, so full of energy still.
Yeah.
So my name is Thijs. I'm the general manager of OTTRED. With our headquarters in Portugal. And basically what we are building is a white label app store for car manufacturers worldwide. And we are building basically a distribution channel for content, an easy way for content to come into the car and basically bring your application to as many car manufacturers as possible. And that's what we're doing. We have already a big range of customers in the automotive industry, already live in the streets with BMW, with Mini, with Mercedes-Benz, with Dacia, with the Geely Group. And we're gearing up to have 20 million connected cars with our solution live in the next year. So it's a big opportunity.
One of the things I'm looking forward to getting into, Thijs, is actually a point that you've made a few times when we've spoken, Felix, which is that this is happening now. This is not a conceptual strategy. It's got market traction, and the kind of logos that you've just mentioned in the automotive world are serious players. They are way into this journey. So we'll come back to that, Thijs.
Right.
Felix, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Quick introduction myself. Felix Walter. I'm head of automotive at 3SS, 3Screen Solutions. We are also bringing content into cars like Faurecia. We also do it together with Faurecia. We are not the app store provider, but rather, if you would compare it, then the launcher experience. But we rely on apps which are there, which are available to surface them, to also bring in the content. And we also enable, if there are probably content providers without an own app yet, still enabling them to get into the car and then getting data and insights to make a decision if it's worth developing their own app. And I can tell you it is. And this is basically what we are doing. I'm coming from the automotive industry. I was working at an automotive supplier before, so I had no experience about content partnerships, streaming, and all of those things.
Wow.
Just as a consumer. And I really learned that this is a very, very complex field. But I learned a lot and enjoyed the discussions we had already in your podcast.
Absolutely. Well, that podcast was an eye-opener for me, Felix, because I'm a petrol head anyway. I love cars, I love technology, and I work in streaming. So when we had that conversation, it felt very fluid, very natural, very interesting to me at a personal level. And this is one of the things about this topic, you know, the rise of in-car streaming, entertainment, the development of devices, and to your point, Thijs, the way that whole ecosystem has to work together, the integrity of the whole topology is essential to making this work right, and therein lies the complexity that you just alluded to. Let's start off at a slightly higher level than that. What has given rise to the need for this? What's the change in the market that sets the context for this becoming such a potentially, and we think it will be, massive thing? Thijs, you want to start off?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the technology made a big leap in the last few years. So basically what we're seeing is a convergence across the car manufacturers to get behind a certain technology. In this case, a lot of Android focus. So that's one. So there's a big push to a certain way of implementation. Second of all, technology. More screens, bigger screens, HD screens are being developed for the car. And you have the growth of connectivity. So the new vehicles will all be equipped with either 4G or 5G connectivity, and that just gives a massive input in rise to what we basically call the living room on wheels, right?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And on top of that, I think it's bringing a lot of new use cases to the car, entertainment, productivity, like your Zoom calls, but also streaming video, right?
Yeah.
So it's your living room, but equally as safe as your living room. And that's, I think, something that we in the automotive industry are working hard on, is making sure that there's no distraction, there's no safety concerns for you as a driver.
Absolutely.
We put the customer first and the safety of the customer first.
Yeah. So the app development that you're doing at Forvia is one aspect of bringing that all together. What's the 3SS role or focus within that, all of those layers of complexity?
Like, we are not focusing on app development itself or the app store, because there are app store providers existing with a very, very big reach already, like Thijs mentioned. So if you have apps and if you have content and they're somewhere in the app store, it still requires that the person actively search for this app, opens or downloads the app, and then opens this app. And you know it from your mobile phone. I mean, if I check my app store, that's like 130 updates. I didn't even know that I have so many apps on the phone. So the streaming experience that we know from smart TVs is more focused on, let's say, the content-centric part and not the app-centric part. Sure, some series are only streamed at a certain streaming provider, so you open the app and then you watch it there. But if it's more about being entertained and just exploring a little bit, we are on the surfacing part of the content area, the launcher, where you can see different contents and then link directly to those ones. Also recommendations, contextualized recommendations, the link to car APIs and all of those things. But that only works if you have content and applications available with a great user experience and user interface.
When we spoke last week, guys, we were talking about the business potential. The thing ultimately at a commercial level that's motivating you guys to lead your businesses forward. We also witnessed, I think last year, Ford recruit somebody very senior from Apple to start spearheading their thought process and strategic traction in this arena. Let's explore what you guys think of when you try and calibrate the dimensions of what this market is and what it could become. How do you make those calculations in your strategic forecasting? What's the potential of the market?
I think the potential is, as a new platform, is huge for the content industry. So let's focus on the content industry. Let's focus on bringing content to loyal customers. And basically, as a streaming media, you want to follow your loyal customers from the couch to whatever transport means they have, right? So in the train and the bus, we're all using our phones. Yeah. In your car, you have the unique opportunity to create a tailored environment for you to really consume content. And just thinking about the amount of cars being produced every year, so roughly 100 million worldwide. That is a massive market you can tap into, right?
Huge.
And it will, maybe compared to mobile, it's small, relatively small, but it's a captive audience, and it's an audience that is already a customer of the content players, which tremendous spending power because they are a car owner, right? So it's not like you have a bike and just a mobile phone, or you own a car. So it's a big opportunity for the coming years.
Yeah.
And if I might add something, like you were saying, there are roughly 100 million cars sold worldwide per year. And look at how many of those have video streaming, great entertainment. We're just in the really, really early stages, just the beginning. Yeah. So imagine, all of those cars will accumulate over the next years. And if you say there's a life cycle maybe of 8 years of one of those cars, then we're coming from, let's say, maybe 5 million or 20 million up to 800 million cars in the next 8 years until it reaches a platform, until it reaches a level. And this is just, if you ask me how do we estimate it, it's just massive. It's really hard to estimate.
It's really interesting when you say it like that, Felix, because it's almost like monthly recurring revenue type dynamic that it starts to make you think about. It's the residual benefit, not only of what you do from here on incrementally forwards, but actually what's going to happen with all that. I know when we rent a car, when we go anywhere, if it doesn't have Apple Play, oh my God, we're lost. That's just a tiny fraction of what we're talking about in terms of the psychological relationship with your expectation when you enter an automotive space. let me ask you a question, guys. Where does it start from in terms of the user experience? We're talking about a content-centric approach here, but you also mentioned productivity, which was quite arresting as a topic for me. You talked about Zoom in your introduction, and it made me start thinking, Thijs, about, well, if they're just two aspects of this, I think about content as a streaming guy. You mentioned productivity. What's the whole solar system or constellation of things that you guys think about what in-car entertainment might constitute?
If I might start with that one,
Yeah.
That's a so good and interesting area because it's so important. And I would like to understand it a bit easier, comparison to the plane. Like if you're traveling on a plane for, let's say, 6 hours, 8 hours, 2 hours, doesn't matter. What do people usually do? You see them if you look around. Some of them are working on their computers because they have urgent things to do or just meetings afterwards. They need to prepare, so they do that. Others just sit there and enjoy entertainment. And if you do sort of the comparison, maybe in the mornings you see more people working on it, and when they're flying back home in the evening, they're more on the entertainment side of the screen work, how you would call it. And I see this similar to the car, especially when it comes not only autonomous driving, but those advanced driving assistance systems. Like if you can get driven in Germany on a highway with 130 kilometers for 2 hours, then I wouldn't drive myself anymore just to reach 150. I just would get driven and use the time, and I would use time to work, or I would use time to use entertainment. And on the driver's seat, working on your laptop is not really good because you still got the steering wheel. Yeah. So having a nice screen, having some good commands like voice commands and easy things, that will be a pretty interesting part of work. At least that's how we see it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think the autonomous driving or driver assist will be a major game changer.
Massive.
And, when we started the company, we thought, okay, let's focus on mobile. What are people using on their mobile phone? And let's start bringing that to the car. But we already see at this point, and we are 4 years down the road, with the first cars now in the market, that the customers are demanding something else. They're demanding, okay, I use the car for my daily commute to work. I want to touch base with my colleagues, whether it's on Zoom or Teams or whatever, and already join early meetings. Or I want to be entertained. I want to listen to the latest news. We all do that. It's traditional radio consumption in the car. But now the next phase, okay, autonomous driving is on the rise, or you're stationary, you're waiting for your children at school. I want to follow my series or watch the news, or on my way from work back home, this football match I want to follow. So that it creates a huge opportunity for new content.
Every time I have one of these conversations with you guys, it just sparks off such a huge line of questions in my mind that I have to try and throttle back on, I need to ask the most relevant ones. But what I was just thinking about is a podcast that I recorded in May after CabSat with a guy called Oliver Davies, who's the head of Samsung TV products. And so many companies now are thinking about this device ecosystem topic, and what arrested me about what he was talking about is not only is all this data captured about what people are consuming and when, it's not just the content or the conscious stuff like productivity, also health. Health is a big thing for Samsung. The wearables and the way that they can collect data, and then what they do to interpret and integrate that data into other aspects of your interaction experience. I can imagine the car being a very, very similar thing. The types of your health that it can monitor. Moving the conversation on, let's talk about some of the regulatory type topics. Now, we already spoke about safety. It's a kind of obvious but massively important topic on the horizon of this conversation. Content licensing as well. You spoke about aviation, Felix, and that's something that they need to cope with. What other things do you guys think of, or what are the things that create the most gravity right now when it comes to the regulatory environments that you need to consider in order to take this journey forward for the moment in time that we're in?
What we see a lot, and the most requests we get at the moment from customers or when we're being in RFQs, is about GDPR.
Interesting.
That's such an important point, because on the one hand, every car manufacturer wants also to monetize the screens. They want to sell ads, and they want to sell targeted ads and personalized ads, and they want to use it. And the more data you have, the higher the prices are that you can charge for it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, car manufacturers are really, really cautious about everything that might infringe your personal information in this GDPR right, especially in Europe, US also, and they are really, as it's early stage, cautious and aware and want to make sure that nothing happens. So that's a regulatory topic that we experience very, very often. I don't know about.
No, I totally agree, and I think especially from a car manufacturer side, they are very cautious on this, and they should be. Right? It's key. We're talking about customer data more and more. We have a huge already discussions on mobile, and we're collecting data from all these big tech giants. So we, as an industry, we should be very cautious about that, and to make sure that we keep the trust of the customers, right? Because it's great to bring all these cars with all this technology to the market, but if in the end the consumer says, "Oh, what's happening to my data?" and being sold left or right, that's the key thing.
In so many topics that we have, not just about automotive, in the broadcasting world and IT generally, data, the collection of data, where it's stored, who it's been sold to, all of this is so important. And it kind of makes me progress into a dimension of this conversation around not just collecting that data, but network capacity, over-the-air updates, making sure that all of the software in this ecosystem can actually be serviced in a way that suits people without infringing on their life. They don't need to plug something in. How do you guys think about that? Because obviously for the consumer, that's not something that they even shouldn't be something they need to worry about, right?
No, but it's a huge dissatisfier, right? So for the customer. Yeah. So just imagine that you bought a fantastic new car, and you drive it 2 blocks from your house, and your internet connectivity is down.
Yeah.
Right. So great, you have all the capabilities, all the massive screens, but you cannot consume content. So it's in that sense a key focus, because it will really impact the way customers are consuming and seeing their new car and their content in the car.
100%, absolutely. On that topic, Thijs, I've thought of this before. It kind of amazes me that we still call this thing a phone, because using it as a phone is probably one of the least used aspects of functionality, and I can imagine that the car is going to become a similar thing. It will be an environment that people go into, and the fact that they're moving from one location to another will become almost peripheral to what they actually experience physically and psychologically. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's difficult to grasp, I think, for 3 petrol heads to
yeah, absolutely.
that it becomes just a way of mobility, but probably that's the way forward. Yeah.
From a 3SS perspective, Felix, what's your view on this kind of updates, experience, the way it can be done, the amount of capacity? That again, they need to be behind the scenes aspects of making the whole thing work, right?
There are a lot of behind the scenes aspects, and if you look at it, I don't want to talk about the technical solution and if there will be 5G networks everywhere. I just think this is nothing we can directly influence. Not us, not the content providers, not the car manufacturers. These are other drivers, but it will develop and it will get better. And I think 5 years back, or maybe 8 years, you would never think that it's possible to watch a movie while you're on the bus somewhere on way to school, to work, whatever. You just thought it's too much data, and it's working.
Yeah.
I rather see it like the car manufacturers, they are collecting a lot of data on the car itself, like how's it driving, the motor status, all of that data, they're collecting it all the time, so they need to have a data connection to their car, and that's a lot of data that is coming from every single car and a lot of cars out there. So this means a lot of cost, and as car manufacturers are quite cost aware, then the user wouldn't be willing to pay for it if your car company comes to you and say, hey, could you please give me 10 euros a month so we can collect our own data? You would tell them, no, I won't.
Yeah.
Because why should I? It's the data you want. But then going through entertainment things and selling, for example, entertainment packages that create a value to the user and the car owner, because you have, for example, a streaming subscription included, you have other benefits, and then within this amount that you pay, because it has a value for you, you also support sort of the data costs for the car manufacturer. And this is why it's really interesting for them as well, as a vehicle, to cover costs they anyway have without sort of infringing or giving the user, the owner, a bad feeling, but instead even creating a better value.
Yeah. What I'm thinking about is the two polar ends of the implications of that. Number one, we often think, and so many conversations now are associated to ad-based revenues. That's one side, but if I think about if I get advertised to in my own car, I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy that so much, but other people might have different inclinations. On the other side of things, I guess from a manufacturer's perspective, having a great in-car experience, maybe this is one for you, Thijs, and one that's personalized, can potentially drive loyalty to the brand. So if I own two Audis, for example, no matter which one I get into, the Audi system knows me. That's a way to keep me with Audi, right? It creates stickiness for their proposition.
Exactly. So it's making sure you create a unique experience for the car. So we see a much more focus the last years on the in-cabin experience from all the manufacturers.
Yeah.
And creating a unique experience for you, a high-quality one. That means that if you look at monetization opportunities like car in-car payments that are coming, advertising that we all know, and we're listening for the radio for all ages, and we are being targeted with advertising with that. For some reason we accept that. So there will be a premium advertising experience also, whatever form or shape that will be, for other applications. But it's making sure that we protect the customer and we create an added value for the customer in the car, and that's key, and not bombard them with banners or nonsense applications, nonsense advertising. We have all that data from the car. Let's use it and ingest it into a solution that in the end makes sense for both the car manufacturer, the industry, and the customer. In the end, we should take the customer first. And just going back to the technology side of things, one of the things we're working on as all the suppliers to provide these solutions is making sure that you can constantly, as an industry, update your content. So over-the-air updates are extremely important. Not only just to make sure that your content stays fresh, but also making sure that, as we all know, the content industry is changing rapidly, right? So, and you own your car for multiple amounts of years, so that we can upgrade the content you see in your car. There's a rise of new apps every week, every month, every year. We need to provide that content quickly.
It's a huge risk, isn't it? If you think about your in-car entertainment system in 2 or 3 years, when we're all much more familiar with more advanced systems like this, if that becomes end of life, it makes a huge part of your user experience of that vehicle gone. Just a huge deficit. And that's something at the other end of brand loyalty that I'd imagine the car manufacturers are very keen to avoid.
Exactly, 100%. And this also, it matched a little bit to the discussion or the answer you just gave, because what you said, the challenges for suppliers like us is the ones you mentioned, but also the ones making sure that we are providing a solution that they can control and maintain and still make sure that they will be able to do it over the next 15, 20, 30 years. Sure, I would love to have those relationships with car manufacturers for over 15, 20 years, but everybody knows that sometimes there are just new RFQs and then you might be out after 5 years or 10 years or whatever. This is just reality. So we have to make sure that we deliver something they can use also after that time, or easily, let's say, transfer to a new system. So it needs to be natively integrated, it needs to be open, it needs to be open to app developers, and make it then possible to even improve it after a possible relationship might have ended. That's important.
I've realised that the momentum behind our conversation are from 3 guys that operate in the kind of content streaming in-car entertainment space. I don't want to be assumptive about the appetite that might or might not exist on your client's end. When you're engaging automotive manufacturers, where's their psychology in terms of how much they recognise and want to embrace what we're speaking about here? Are you educating them, or have they got a strong appetite for what you've got to take to the table?
I guess we're in a little bit different stages. I think Faurecia did their educating already since years, because it's something they were asking for, but maybe Thijs, you can probably better explain it, and then I give our opinion on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think in the beginning of a couple of years back, we were still educating on the world of content. So the view of the content industry to the automotive industry. And now we see that really changing. We see that car manufacturers are educated. They know what they want. They put the customers really first. So in terms of content inside the vehicle, of course there are lots of hurdles to be taken, and that's why solution providers such as ourselves or 3SS come into play to really help the car manufacturers to overcome these hurdles. But creating a unique experience in the car, that is what the car manufacturers are really focused on.
Yeah. So they're receptive, they're warm. If you had to give it a score out of 10, what would it be at the moment? What was it 2 years ago, and where is it now?
I think we went from a 7 to 8, so already some improvements, yes.
Tangible incremental increase. Yeah. Felix, you said you're at a different stage. How would you describe the 3SS take on it?
Just one question before for Thijs, because I think, is there still any car manufacturer out there who doesn't think having an app store in the cars is necessary?
No.
About the app stores, there's clarity. Every car manufacturer wants to have an app store. So this education, that's what I meant, you did already since years,
exactly,
and it worked out, and that's done and settled. So you were talking now about content.
It's a really powerful metric, actually. It is. That's kind of like milestone 1.
Exactly. And I would say from our perspective, rather, because what we are offering is an entertainment space that is branded to the car manufacturer, but it also means they somehow are responsible for it. They need to maintain it. They need to make sure that it's up to date always. And only this, if you accept it, then you also get all the opportunities out of it. Yeah. Like non-obtrusive advertisement, and I wouldn't even call it advertisement, but you probably can just show a new cool marketing video about the launch of a new model that you have in this entertainment space. Yeah. Coming back to your question, to understand all the benefits, but also the things you have to do to achieve them, I would say we have been coming from a 2. Maybe. It also depends on car manufacturers. There are ones that are far ahead already. There are others who just started thinking about it. Maybe from a 2 to a 5 or 6. But it's really rapid. Like, they understand so fast, and they really know and understand that it's going to be a thing that's important. Yeah. And additionally, they know it already from their living. I mean, everybody who's working at a car company usually has either a smart TV or a set-top box or mobile or streaming, all of that. They know it. So they understand it pretty easy and can easily transform it then also to the car.
Final question, guys, before we wrap up this exciting first episode of our podcast here at IBC. What are the kind of immediate trends that you can see happening that you think are really going to captivate the attention of the public when they start to emerge at the next stage of evolution? Is it going to be connection with their Netflix? Is it going to be something around something more off-piste? Is there something that you can think of that you think is going to hit the news?
What I think is, at the moment we see in the car industry and in car entertainment sort of what we call Insellösungen in Germany, like this single island solution things, like there's an app and there's something and there's an experience. I think what will be the next step is merging them together into one experience. And we're not only talking about video, but also having one entertainment space where you have video, audio, gaming, work, all those things blended together. And I think this is going to be the next step. And this is probably the biggest trend I see right now.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think on top of that, and that's what you guys are bringing as 3SS, is the discovery of all that content. So it's one thing to bring all that content to the car. The next step is, okay, if we're fighting for attention, how do we bring that in a short space to the customer at the right time? And in the car, even more so difficult than on a mobile phone, right? Yeah. So that will be a huge frontier. On top of that, I think the next topic will be connecting with all the sensors and sound and light inside the vehicle, creating a really cinematic approach. And I think that's a fantastic
You're exciting me talking about it.
Exactly.
Guys, I want to extend my thanks not only on behalf of myself, all the OTTRED community and everybody listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube and LinkedIn, but obviously our sponsors today, Bedrock Streaming, who have pulled us all together for this amazing conversation. I hope you have a very productive rest of the IBC 2024, and thank you so much for being guests on this topic on the OTTRED Spotlight podcast.